Okay, great. So nice to meet you in live like reactions,
Yeah,
you know.
I love this. I'm like, wow, I think it's been years that we've been following each other and kind of messaging back and forth and stuff, but here we are. It's so
Yeah, I
cool.
know. I know. And I didn't tell you this and I can cut this out of the interview, but my I was following you and then at one point my therapist brought you up and I was like, "Yeah, I love her work and blah blah blah." And then a few weeks later you followed me back and I got to go tell my therapist, like you will not believe who followed me, Miss Kai Cheng Thom.
That's
Um
hilarious. Oh my God, thanks
it
for
was
telling me that.
really
Whether we use it or not in the interview, I think it's great.
yeah, it was really sweet. It was like very exciting to be like, oh my God, I have to tell Wanda.
You're not the first person who said that because I'm not that famous really, but I am therapy famous. And so there's this
Totally.
very particular niche where I'm like, yes, people know me, but
Yeah.
I think it's sweet. And if I can help anyone and their therapist do whatever they want to do, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the work. That's the work. Um, okay. Well, I love like your take on consent, and I have felt like there's such an alignment here in um really kind of like moving past this like 50-50 question, like yes or no, is this okay? Like well beyond that into, the diagrams that you make, the diagrams that I make, just like with all this sort of um gray space between yes and
Mhm.
no, and like even like what is that process like internally, making a choice, feeling choiceful maybe. um is that real, like is that an illusion, like I really that's like really meaty stuff for me. And I also really appreciate um the ways that I think you see, as I do, like this language and these concepts being sort of co-opted to like tear communities apart and like hurt people and tear them down. So I wanted to talk to you about what consent is not today.
Yeah, I love that. I'm so excited. It feels super edgy and really exciting.
Yeah.
And then I just wanted to shout you out back, like I'm really lucky to get to know like such cool consent and sex educators. And when I came across your work, I was like, bam, it's like that feeling that happens when um, you can feel your brain expanding in response to
Yes.
someone else's work. And I was like, yes, yes, because they're
Oh wow.
diagrams that you make, but they're mental models also, and they're embodiment models. And I feel
Hmm.
like when you put something into images and words, it creates so much more space to do practice differently. So yeah, thank you. I just really value what you do.
Thank you. I love how you put that. I'm really gonna hold on to that.
Yeah, cool.
Well, okay, maybe it would be good to hear your definition then of consent and then what you think it's not.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, I'm always afraid of the like, how do you define consent question? Because I sort of believe that something that consent is not is like one thing that applies to every single context where a choice might be made or could be made or should be
Absolutely.
made. But I'm just gonna go with tried and true. I don't have like a super strong personal definition that I quote unquote made up by myself. But the definition I really, really like, I get from the somatic sex education field, which is like my home lineage of practice these days, like of like somatic healing and transformation, all that kind of stuff. Somatic sex education, which is a profession, and it's kind of connected to queer history and the history of the AIDS crisis and sex worker movements. And we tend to use an empowered choice and voice model. So this is really
Hmm.
about practicing consent as an opportunity to create an expansive space for people to get to notice the yes, no,
Hmm.
maybe I changed my mind inside themselves, the experience of that, and then to get to voice that, to articulate
Hmm.
whether that is, through actual language and voice, or if it's through gesture or some other form of expression, like what is happening for them. So consent
Hmm.
is a dynamic process. It's about the yes, no, maybe. It's about getting to voice things. And then it is about trying to cultivate empowerment, which is not to say that everyone is always empowered or should always have to feel empowered, but that is kind of like a general orientation to consent as a process, a verb, a practice. Does that make
Mm,
sense?
totally. Yes. That's, I mean, that's very aligned with a lot of the things that I say, but I'm gonna look back at some of the language that you're using because I think it's really helpful. And yeah, I talk about it as a practice. I like the word process. And I also like what you're talking about, that it's like it's the act of engaging with what's going on internally and the expression piece. Because so much of that just immediately undercuts like this idea that consent is like a thing that happens in one moment, that it's a thing that you can like give and take back, like a poker chip or something. Um, yeah, like that really just encompasses, and then it also gets right at the heart of like what I'm talking about consent not being, which is like this tool to control other people or to um, get out of doing things that might make you a little uncomfortable. I didn't consent to that difficult conversation, like that
Right,
type of
right. I didn't
thing.
consent
Um,
to you having these feelings about me.
exactly. I didn't
I didn't
consent to you
consent to you
talking.
disliking me.
Yeah, I didn't consent to you talking to someone else about me. Like that, that to me is just like such a gross misuse. And it also, I mean, really, it makes me really sad. It makes me really sad because like the way that you define consent just now and the way that I try to define it in my classes is like it's such a beautiful thing, and it's like meant to help us like be more connected to ourselves and more connected to other people. And so then when I see it get um yeah, like used to do really negative things or split people apart, I'm just like, oh no, like where have we gone wrong? Or where what's like, as a consent educator, how do I make sure that people don't leave my classes like thinking that that's what this is?
Mm-hmm. Oh gosh, thank you. You're doing the holy work here. Holy in many senses, perhaps. But like just
uh,
like the yeah, I'm super grateful to hear you talking about it this way and to hear our weird little field also starting to shift around this. Because it's not workable, nor is it desirable to be in
oh,
the space of like consent as contract, consent as obligation, consent as weird domination from the bottom. Like it's all,
yeah,
yeah, it's a lot.
yeah. Well, I wonder what you see. I mean, not that we have to like solve this problem right now, but like what have you found helps or works to keep keep an understanding of consent in the realm of like the way that you're defining it in this like really positive and connective way, and how do you steer people away from, and even yourself, like I notice in myself, these moments where I'm really activated or I'm really stressed, or when I've been really sick in the past where I'm like, yeah, like no one's doing enough. And I catch myself kind of being like, well, where did they screw up so that what happened isn't my fault? Like I don't ever want to be like, well, those people do that and I don't do that because I'm one of the good ones. But like how do you combat that urge in yourself, or help other people combat it in them to use consent that way?
Totally. I mean, yeah, I think as soon as we start to be like, I'm one of the good ones, that's when we lose our grip on how to be
Yeah.
generally good. But yeah, well, I'm just kind of spitballing here, like kind of it's interesting to notice that I use the kind of the practice and process of consent as like a dynamic kind of thing in work and life, and then I haven't in a while kind of been like, what is it and what is it not in words and stuff. But I guess what I would say is the first thing that comes to mind is I really love the orientation to consent as like its own direction, or like the direction or orientation of consent being towards um, pleasure, joyfulness,
Mm-hmm.
expansiveness, freedom,
Mm.
self-sovereignty, relationship. It becomes then a tool, a philosophy, a practice. It's all those things, right? To go somewhere, to do something which is creative.
Mm,
We're doing rather than using it as a tool to prevent, block, not do, restrict. And I think, unfortunately, the dominant culture and even subcultural understandings of consent are so much of like consent is the tool to not do something wrong. If you do something
yes.
consent based, then you are not in trouble. You are not being the perpetrator. You are not. And then it's automatically then becoming
Mm,
very fear centric and a relational because it's really like then I'm not thinking about the other person as much as I'm thinking about not being in trouble, and then it's also not being as much in contact with myself because I'm pushing away all these parts of myself that could get in trouble and instead
yes.
centering fear, right? So is more about consent as this connective tool for, and then kind of what I said before, like this like trying to be very conscious on a body level and an intellectual level of what is my desire, what do I
Hmm.
really want, what do I really value, and what about this other person or other people, if there are other people or persons involved, what do we really desire, what do we really want, what do you know, like how are we different? And then this last piece, I guess I'll throw in is like something that I really value from the work of Benny Martin is this concept of domains. And, you know, I think there's a lot of ways that we could debate this too. Like, but the basic idea is like that consent supports us to know what is ours, what we have a right to and a responsibility for. And, you know, we could problematize this language, but I think in practice it makes things clear. I don't want to use my consent. I don't think I should use my consent practice to try and tell people what they should be thinking, feeling, or doing.
Yes.
Um, you know, like if I want them to do something, I should be honest about it and just say, I want you to do this. But I don't think I can be like, I consent or don't consent to you living this way. And I think an obvious example for a lot of progressive people is like, you know, how conservative Christian folks will sometimes say, well, did Jesus consent to you having sex or whatever? Like, it's this kind of thing of like using this idea of consent to get in someone else's freedom and try to take it away from them. And maybe I could have avoided saying all of this like by just saying, I like it when consent is about creating more freedom, not
Yes.
less.
Yes. I mean, I love that you're using the word create and creative. Like there's a whole section in this book about consent as sort of like um, a window to creativity and even like
Hmm.
bringing it into art. And then also like looking at sex as an art form, a collaborative art form. But that's interesting that you went to domains. I love that concept, but I did think that you were going to willingness.
Oh, yeah, I also do like
Yeah,
that.
me too. Me too.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Can you talk because I've talked about it, but I'd love to hear it in your words.
totally. Okay, yeah, I mean, I love this willingness thing. It's such an interesting gray space. Yeah, and I mean, so willingness to me is this idea of like um being I'm trying to find a way to define this without using the
Without
word.
the word.
Yeah,
Yes.
like willingness is like when we are choosing, actively choosing to do something that doesn't bring us immediate gratification or pleasure, or like have like an immediate personal benefit. It's for someone else. The action
Yeah.
we're doing is for someone else, or the interaction that we're doing. And then I like to think of willingness as like having a potential payoff in the future
Mm,
or an
sure.
unknown kind of benefit, which is more relational, right? Like I am willing to give someone, I don't know, a blowjob, even if I'm not dying to give them a blowjob. You know, I'm like, I personally
Right.
might not want to in that moment, but I'm willing to because I love them or I care about them or I don't know, I want them to pay me $5,000 or however I want them to pay. That's actually honestly a lot. I would never have charged that much, but I've gotten really good over the past few years. Anyway, we'll see. It's like it's a willingness is about something about the field that then allows me to do something else, do something for someone else in a way that doesn't harm me or take
Yeah.
away from my freedom. Yeah.
Yes, totally. Right. And I think especially like, expanding this into like community, right? Like often I'm like willing to do something for my community that I have no personal desire to do, but it's gratifying in some way because I feel like I'm contributing. I feel like I'm, part of a group. I'm helping the greater good, whatever. Excuse me. But what it also brings to mind, and I think we're sort of touching on all these some really big philosophical questions here. I studied philosophy in college, so I,
This explains a lot. I didn't know this,
I
but
bet.
this explains so much. Okay, perfect. Perfect.
And it's funny because when I chose it in college, I was like, this is such a bullshit major. Like, I'm never going to use this for the rest of my life. But like, at least I thought it allowed me to like not make a choice. It was a way to
Mm,
avoid a choice because I was like, well, I can study the philosophy of anything. Turns
right.
out that's really not true. Yes, you can study the philosophy of anything, but philosophy is actually really specific, really
Yes.
specific. Anyway, I think, one of the questions that this brings up for me is like, is altruism like a real, is there anything that is like not um also like personally benefiting you, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And
Mm-hmm.
I have thoughts on that. And then there's also this question of like, do we have free will? Like, do we have choice? Like, or,
Really are just bringing in the deep ones, eh? I'm like, wow, that went there super.
you
This is
know,
totally philosopher
it's
questions.
it's big stuff because I like the biggest hypocrisy of my life is that I simultaneously believe that we have very little free will and control over our choices. Like our paths are largely carved for us. And at the same time, I believe it's really important to take responsibility for your choices. Like how do I don't even totally reconcile that. I just try to hold both of those things to be true. And then the third philosophical question that we were is like, can we ever fully know ourselves? Like we can try and we can work towards that, ever moving goal, but like, can we ever fully know who we are, what we want, how we feel, so
Yeah.
on and so forth?
I love, yeah, I mean, and it's a mystery. I love that. It's a mystery. I don't think we're going to be able to figure that out in the next 20 minutes.
No.
But I think what I really like about that, and I notice, let me know if I'm bouncing too quickly back into the practical, but I think it's sort of like consent is just this like deeply troubling mystery. And it's
Yeah.
also so exciting for day-to-day life. But I think that maybe because of the fear orientation and the attempt to get away from punishment, which is
Mm-hmm.
so present all around us, we forget and we like that it is a mystery, and there's this potential tendency to think about consent as like something that has a clear answer. And for sure, I mean, I think there are cases where it's really clear, like, you shouldn't
Yeah.
violate somebody, you shouldn't attack somebody, whatever,
Right.
these important things. But we're not going to get to this place where it is really easy and everybody knows. I remember something that was driving me really, really up the wall when it was like, there was a while in my kind of in my home community where people would make these posts on social media. It was Facebook at the time, where people were like, "Oh, I don't understand people who do consent violations, and consent is so easy. It's just really simple." I'm like, man, you're just making me feel like I don't want to interact with you because I don't think consent is easy, and if you do, I I'm worried.
I know.
And I'm also just
Yeah.
worried that I'll do it wrong in your eyes, and then I'll be
Right.
wrong. And
Right.
I think that we actually, yeah, maybe this comes full circle, but I guess what I'm saying is I think that the embodiment of consent is actually usually more skillful when we
Hmm.
acknowledge that it touches these existential questions that will never have a clear answer.
Right. Right. Yeah, I completely agree. Some of the things that I say that consent is not is one is I mean, I mentioned like a tool for punishment, a way to control other people, but I also say that it's not something you can ever do perfectly and it's
Mm,
not math. I
yeah.
think that there's this approach to consent that you're describing that's like, if I just know the formula or the equation and I just do it correctly, then I will find the one right answer and I'll be able to, never hurt anybody, never make anyone uncomfortable. I'll never get in trouble. I will never be hurt. I will always be safe. And to go back to this word creative, like I think it's so much more something for us to approach as like an art form or like literature or something where we're interpreting.
Hmm.
practicing our interpretation skills and then our self-expression skills.
Oh,
There's
that's
no,
really beautiful. I love
thank
that.
you. Thank you. It's not, the like do the process and then you get the answer. It's like this very different way of engaging that you learn less in a math or science class and more maybe in like a literature class, an English class, or an art class.
That's yeah. I mean, I think this is profound. Consent is an art, right? And I
Yes,
mean, we come back to creative process. I mean, I think about, and I don't want to knock this too much because I do think there's utility, but there are consent practices that are literal math. You know the one where it's
sure.
like, are you three fingers up or two fingers up to do this activity, and then you count the number of people finger. I don't quite know that one too well, but there is like
I don't know that
literal
one.
numbers based consent. Oh, I'm gonna send you that.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I think it started as a consensus building tool, and then it got brought into the consent world.
Oh, okay.
Right, you're like, am I three fingers up for this decision with a maximum number of 10? Yeah, you can be 0 to 10, and then
Hmm.
whatever. It kind of shows where you are.
Hmm.
But like, yeah, I guess I think consent practices give us so much information that is beyond the quantitative. Like,
Yes.
it gives us a texture of who we are, and
Hmm.
that's so different from the like yes or no 50-50 model you're talking about. I do want to say kind of one more piece which feels really important to name in a like a conversation about what consent is not. And to me, consent is really not this definition that drives me again kind of mad. It's like the like enthusiastic, informed, ongoing.
Yes.
What's there's one more of the well,
Reversible, freely given, specific.
well, I like reversible and freely given better, but but yeah, this kind of campus model of college
Yes.
campus model of
Yes.
consent, it just is so. I mean, sex workers were calling that one out right away, because of the enthusiastic word, which is just completely deletes willingness and like a whole
Yes.
section of people's agency from perceived existence, but then also because of this idea of explicit and informed. You can't really be fully informed about something before it happens, particularly something as dynamic
Absolutely.
as human interaction. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, I really love how you're putting that because I talk about that in this piece that I wrote called if you can't talk about sex, you shouldn't be having sex. Is abstinence light? Where like
yeah.
because I don't think that you can know until you're doing it. I don't think that we can tell people if you can't talk about this thing that you've never done, then you shouldn't be doing it. Like how do you learn without doing? Um but I also this point about enthusiasm, I don't want to harp on it too much because I harp on it so much, but it's really been very, very interesting to see the ways that like people who do what I do, who work in the fields that I work in, you included and lots of other people who do this work professionally are so tired of this enthusiasm requirement for so many reasons. I mean, it's not just that it deletes willingness, but it also like has led to a lot of people thinking that what happened to them was rape, assault, non-consensual because they weren't like hell yes about something when willingness may have been present or curiosity may have been present alongside some nervousness. Like there's just way more going on, and I think that blanket requirement of enthusiasm has unfortunately accidentally created a lot of confusion and wrong like misunderstandings. um what you're talking about, this campus education, I call bumper sticker education.
Yes. Oh, that's also really good.
Yeah,
Gonna
thank
remember that one. Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
right, where it's like if you just like let's embroider it on a pillow and then we're good to go.
Remember when people, this is a pet peeve. Remember when people would cross stitch annoying social
Yeah,
justice slogans and then put, oh God, I mean, no offense to anyone who cross stitches social justice slogans, but it's not a good way to teach complex layered processes like consent.
it is not. It's not. I know. Or like, you get a tattoo like empathy will save the world or something. It's like this is not, we're not teaching people how to do these things. And I think when you say like anything other than a hell yes is a no, I agree. Like something that you touched on was like it removes agency. It actually like takes away my agency to say like if you weren't feeling these exact feelings or didn't do this exact process, then what happened to you is not what you think it was.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And I mean, I think this makes sex kind of terrifying. If you really carry this out to this,
Totally.
then I'm like,
Ugh.
there are so many moments in sex with delightful, loving, sweet partners where it's awkward, smelly, bad, uncomfortable, even momentarily painful or something. And I'm like,
Yes.
so this is what then? What territory is this if it's not consensual and okay? It falls into this realm of not okay. It might even fall into the realm of assault. And this is terrifying. I am terrified for particularly people who are less experienced with sex, so often adolescents, but
Right.
also adults of any age can be less experienced. And then have they heard this idea that if they're not doing it perfectly, not being perfectly pleased, perfectly pleasing others, then that they're in assault territory? This is not helpful. It does not prevent assault. And I think it actually might
No.
increase the possibility because people are so vulnerable going into
Right.
anyway, it really gets my goat, this whole thing.
No, I want to, I mean, I think this thing that you're saying that it might even like increase the possibility, the potential is so real because when you're in that perfectionist mindset of like, and that people pleasing mindset of like, I just want to make sure that you're safe and you're pleased and that you're okay, you're not listening. You're not listening to them. You're not listening to yourself. You know, like it's really, I was just writing about this yesterday, like moving from these questions of like, am I doing this right? Is this good? And moving like away from those towards the question, do I like this? How do I feel right now? You know, how is this for you? Like much more like in the moment, what is happening right now? Do we want to change anything? Like much more open-ended questions that get us out of that perfectionist headspace.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, maybe because it's so edgy, I feel this need to like speak to this other thing, which is that when we are in the gray space of exploration and something is uncomfortable or bad or painful or triggering or whatever, um, there is it's totally possible that we could have a really really negative, really painful, traumatic even experience within this gray zone of like, is it willing, did I want that, was it really bad, right? Like there is this total possibility that we can be consenting to some extent to something that is hurting us. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I consent to do capitalism jobs, all the
Yes.
time, and they're definitely hurting me in some ways, and I love them, sometimes, but also not all the time. Like I think it makes it much easier for people to embrace a complex model of consent if something simple that we can tell them is your pain and your discomfort always matter, no matter what.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I think it's really important. Like, I know that sometimes I say things that out of context can push buttons. I am aware of this. And, a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, certainly if you don't hear this piece of like, you know, and if you have a negative experience that leaves you with any kind of negative feelings or trauma, like you deserve help. There should be resources that can help you find affordable help, accessible help, um, and and that you're not like stuck there. Like this doesn't have to become, you're not broken. Like it doesn't have to become part of your identity that something happened to you that was bad or traumatizing. I'm curious though. Now heard you say that we're talking about edgy stuff a couple times, and can you be specific about what
Yeah.
is so edgy?
It was edgy for me because I have grown up with a deep conditioning, first of Christianity, and
Ah,
then
okay.
second, like deep in the social justice culture of North America, of the
Yeah.
2010s, and I still to some extent the 2020s. And I was first educated in consent through the campus model. I actually first really got into workshop-based consent education through my undergraduate college's local sexual assault response student group, right? And so,
Mm,
because it was also a student-run service, there were no like administration people around. It was very, very radical, in some ways that were great, and in some ways that were like very questionable now. Like I'm like, this is bad practice, you know, like
Mm-hmm.
no fault of anyone in particular, just like some collectively bad decisions, you know.
Sure.
And when I say edgy, I mean, I guess there's two things. One is that I genuinely actually do care about hurting people's feelings. Like, you know, like when people listen to you and me, or they read my writing, or they read your work or whatever, like I care if somebody comes to a workshop or whatever, experiences something of mine, and then feels attacked, put down, disregarded, whatever. I really care about that. And then the other piece is, um, I think it's like I'm afraid of being punished. Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
like I am saying things that are against the orthodoxy with which I was raised
Mm-hmm.
in activism, and I am afraid that if people get triggered by what I say, they'll punish me. Um, and so I notice it's like there's something that where I'm always tracking what is the Overton window of the conversation in the communities that I really care about, and I kind of I can sense where the edge of that window
Mm.
is. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Because I'm thinking about, this concept of domains and like what I can and can't control. And I'm hearing you say that you care about like, how other people leave and how they feel from something that you've said or a class or something. And I wonder how you balance, yeah, like what's not your domain with that concern.
Oh, this is juicy. I love it. Yeah, I mean, it's an ongoing struggle for me. I am a people pleaser by reflex, and it's my trauma that makes me a people pleaser. Sad but true. And I like desperately want people to be happy with me, which is probably why I've gotten into kind of the careers that I've gotten into, right? And that's altered itself from time to time, but the kind of the core pattern is always whispering in the background. And I don't think that's bad. I think it's good and bad. It's existential in its own way. But all of this is to say, um, I think where I'm at right now is I'm really sick and tired of censoring myself and shutting down my own agency in the name of trying to please other people. And
Mm-hmm.
then I also just can't help but notice like this is an attempt to control them. Like I'm trying to, please them so they won't, punish me with them. This is an attempt at control from
Yeah.
me. It's coming from me. And then the reverse is also true. I am really tired of people attempting to control me with like their moral claims. So I don't like that. And so I really going to the edge wherever that is also important to me. And then where I balance that is like genuinely it's not rocket science of how not to be an asshole,
Yeah.
and I think we live in a community, and there's this funny thing about like free speech or free expression doesn't mean that it doesn't have consequences. Well, what I really understand from that phrase is not that people should get to punish you whenever they want for your speech, but that we should acknowledge that our speech affects other people's feelings. Like there is a shared domain where my words touch people's feelings, and that doesn't mean that I shouldn't say things that I believe in if they might be hurtful to people, or that I shouldn't question myself if I get critical feedback or whatever. But I do think it means that um, I I want to care about how my words affect other people. And so maybe it's like the way that I say something or the way that I acknowledge kind of
Mm-hmm.
other possibilities or perspectives. Like I want to be relational, this free expression thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, right. That's exactly what consent is for, is like relating and building relationships and yeah, to care how you impact people um is yeah, like a huge part of that. And I come up against this people pleasing thing of like, right, like I can't go into your mind and make sure that you are okay and not mad at me and that you understand the concepts in their fullness, and that nothing I'm saying is being taken out of context, like I can't control that, and I also can't control like whether or not people attempt to punish me. I recently found like a Reddit thread about me where people were saying that I deserve to be in prison and I should be deplatformed, and they were reporting me on social media. This is like 2 years old. Um,
Why?
and you know, like
Wait,
I
why
don't
should you be in prison?
I don't know. I don't
That's
know
wild.
for things I've said. Um, Again, like taken out of context. I mean, like they cite a post in there where I talk about why I don't really believe sexual assault statistics because they're so flawed and they don't tend to
Mhm.
include trans and non-binary people, and men report even less than women, you know, like, and I explain all of that, and yet like I guess that post was kind of triggering. And you know, to your point, like you're doing a really great job of like contextualizing and like, you know, zooming out a little bit, whereas like I think I forget to do that sometimes. Like I'm like, well, we're talking about this thing right now, and like obviously I'm not saying I don't care about, you know, victims of sexual assault, but like yeah, someone who comes across one post like may not know that. You know, I've been accused of really bizarre things. I think you have too, like a rape
Yes.
apologist, you know, a men's rights activist, like a trad wife, and very, very weird stuff.
Wild.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah, very, very weird. Anyway, like I don't believe in canceling people, exiling people. Um, and you know, like I personally at this point like refuse to participate in that. And yet, you know, I've been asked because I'll talk about it like we have to kind of let go of what we can't control. Like we don't know what people are going to say about us out in the world. We don't know how people are going to interpret what we say. But then I've been asked the question of like, but there's often like really serious real world consequences if someone is trying to get you fired or make sure that people don't work with you anymore, or um start reporting your account, which might be, at least for me, like where I get the majority of my business. You know, so like that's just where I kind of end up in this like I don't know. I don't have the answers to that. I can't control it, and it has real consequences, and I, you know, my book got canceled. Like there's like very real things that can happen. So, yeah, that question of just like what can I control, what can I not? Where am I people pleasing? Where am I no longer willing to do that? Does that put me at risk? You know, these are all just unanswerable questions. I'd like to hear what you think, but I'm not asking for it.
Solutions. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is I think about this all the time too.
Yeah.
And it is really my commitment as well to not participate in cancel culture or call out culture. Maybe those are
Mm-hmm.
the same or different things, but I don't want to participate in either of them.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think it's really just true that we can't control how people react or respond to what we put out in the world. But we don't have to condone it either.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and that's like a practice, like this, like knowing that people are going to do what they're going to do, but also being like, well, I don't have to condone it, and I don't have to help you,
Right.
right? Which is like kind of fundamental to this kind of consent practice, where I think it sounds like we're sort of hoping that other people will take on too. Like ideally, people
Mm-hmm.
would not try to control what we say on the internet, particularly when the things we say are in no way whatsoever advocating for violence or
Right.
like the rollback of anyone's human rights or anything. Like, it would be great if people could just disagree. Like, if they
I would
could
love that. I
write
bring
an
back
essay
the
about why they disagree.
yeah, bring back regular old disagreeing. Like
Yeah, like please, that would be good, probably.
yes. Yes.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know if I have much more to say about it than that. Just um people don't know how to regular old disagree. It feels like the internet is makes it more intense.
Yeah.
And then I guess like I think that there's an edge of between people pleasing and being relationally caring. That's always like an
Mm-hmm.
interesting spot for
Yes.
me. Because like also what I want to model and demonstrate, and what I want people to model and demonstrate for me is like if I'm going to say something that's like iconoclastic or whatever, which is funny how like little things can become iconoclastic these
Totally.
days. But like and I know that, then I think it's like a nice move to like acknowledge like, wow, this might be a big idea for somebody, and that's okay that it's a big idea for them, and they might disagree, and there might be some important reasons they disagree, and then list them. Like I also just think this makes for strong argumentation when we,
Totally.
and I wish other people, if they were going to critique Kai Cheng Thom, or if they're going to contradict me or whatever, then that they would thoughtfully do so, acknowledging the reasons why we might feel and believe the way we do. Like that would be good.
That would be lovely. That would be lovely. I I do try to remember that sometimes the people online, the facelessness of online interaction, it's easy to think that the people critiquing us are as invested as we are in, like, you know,
Oh, they're
doing.
totally not.
They're totally not. Not only are they not, but sometimes they're 12 years old, you know? Like sometimes they're like staying up at night, avoiding not doing their homework, like on their phone.
Yeah.
Um, or they share a lot of political beliefs and values with people that we completely disagree with, you know?
Oh yeah.
Like,
Oh yeah. Or they're trolling or whatever. I mean,
yeah.
I used to be a counselor for teenage queers, right? And I cannot tell you the
Oof.
amount of absurdity, but also real, very important psychological harm and damage that happened because of fandom wars. Like, people having like, like, and I don't mean like like anything that any kind of like balanced adult or whatever would consider weird. Just like, I don't know, people being like, I did a fandom art and it didn't match someone's expectations of what fandom art should be. I would see 14-year-olds or 13-year-olds get hundreds of death threats from presumably
Woo!
other 14 or 15-year-olds or whatever because of like disagreements about fandom, which were then quickly politicized. Like it's like this way that real life political conversation can get turned into something else, but by like removing it completely from context. Like, yeah, anyway, I just it's a pet peeve of mine. And also just like really like those teenagers that I was working with were delightful. Also teenagers.
Right, right. I know. You really like lose a lot of humanity in the facelessness of social media. I don't want to end this on a note of like us, or me anyway, like complaining about the internet. But what
Oh, I
I
love to complain about the
I
internet.
know we could probably vent for hours about the internet, but what I do hope that conversations like these help other people do is loosen this grip that you were describing of, like, like what you say, and um making sure that you're saying the right thing, and being afraid to put yourself out there. Like I know so many people who are very afraid to think their thoughts publicly, and then also put them on social media, for better or for worse. But social media can be an incredible tool, you
Yeah.
know. Um, and I really just I am somewhat invested in like helping at least artists feel like they can express themselves authentically, vulnerably, without, needing a content warning on everything they say, without being afraid of blowback, critique. Like I do really want people to like I hope that these kinds of conversations help people feel more comfortable and confident putting their own voices out in the world.
I love that. I think this is actually a really nice note to end it on. Like it comes back to what consent is not. And I think that so often when people are lashing out in these really intense ways, they're starting harassment campaigns, death threats, trying to get people fired from their livelihood jobs, like all that kind of stuff. In some way, what they're saying often is like, I don't consent to you
Mm,
hurting my feelings or making me feel uncomfortable by putting your thinking or your art on the internet.
right.
And it's like this is an unhealthy and unhelpful way to be as a society because it means that we all then lose the benefit of getting to think together and think out loud, which is kind of the thing that we want consent to be, this empowered choice and voice thing where people get to say how they're feeling about something and what they want, a tool for more freedom rather than less. So I don't know, it's funny that did kind of come around full circle. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I really like that. Um, okay, we can stop there. This was so fruitful and generative for me. I feel like I'm gonna take a lot of this language with me outside of this chat with you. So
Amazing.
thank
I'm
you
so
so
glad. This was
much.
very fun for me. I don't get to be this nerdy, like unabashed for so long.
Yeah.
So it's like
Yeah.
great. I love it. I love it.
Good. I'm so glad. Okay, I'll stop recording. Ah, please say that again.
Okay, I think what's really important and that I get passionate about is that a lot of understanding the impact of the of like restrictive or negative kind of consent models is that it's a pattern recognition thing. It happens at many different levels, in many different ways, in many different contexts, but the result is like often very recognizable. So let's take kind of a consensus example that in from progressive social justice in North America, which is like we all kind of a lot of us agree that when people say, I don't want you to protest against genocide in Gaza because that makes me feel uncomfortable or unsafe. And then they try to censor that and they say, oh, people who advocate for Gaza should be designated terrorists or saying hate speech. We understand that this is censorship and that the application of the consent model here or the safety model doesn't make sense. That actually it is contrary to life. But what we often miss is that we do some version of the same thing. Like when we say, oh, well, if this person is saying an idea about consent that I don't like, then they should be punished and driven off the internet. It may not always be as severe, but we are actually still saying, I don't consent to being uncomfortable, and therefore someone should be punished or maybe even killed or have their livelihood removed, right? Um, and that logic is almost always negative. It is always contrary to like healthy human relating. And it's my really big hope that as people get into these ideas, that we start to recognize these patterns from context to context.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for adding that. I just used that example for the first time yesterday. Like it just came to me in a class where I was like, yeah, we can't be saying like, I don't want to talk about what Israel's doing in Gaza and around the world. That's just my boundary. Like
Hmm.
that is a misuse of boundary and it's a way to like avoid accountability and self-reflection.
Yeah, it disappears this whole other context of life.
Right.
So yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
something that consent is not.
Something that consent is not. Yes. Okay, wonderful.